Nephilim update. Nephilim update. Nephilim update.
We have a Nephilim update in interesting ways. I think we've covered parts of this story before, but there was a new article on it, so we'll get through it here. And it's from Times Now. It was mirrored by MSN. And the headline, Ancient Child Thought to be only known individual whose parents were two different species.
Ooh.
Okay. An ancient child from Siberia is believed to be the only known individual, I think it's known individual, whose parents were from two different species. Okay, so wait a minute. I thought you can't have crossbreeding between species, but okay, let's just continue reading here. The deduction was made possible by the 2010 unearthing of tiny fragments of bone and teeth fragments remains of a Denisovan who lived in lower and middle Paleolithic ages. While we know much about the Neanderthals, not much information is available to the public about Denisovans, except for when we reported on it, and there was a bunch of reports on it at one point. In a first, scientists... Oh, this is the part I wanted to point out. So in this article, there's a link to, another article that, just planting articles in there. And I thought it was part of the article, which confused me, but it was a hyperlink. This whole sentence is a hyperlink, not part of the article, but makes it kind of look like part of the article. In a first, scientists create synthetic embryos in lab without sperm or eggs. The remains were unearthed from the Denisovan. And I was like, whoa. I thought we reported on this thing a week or so ago. But
right.
The synthetic embryos and Denisovan DNA, what is happening? But I think this is just a clever planting of other stories that make it look like it's part of the story, but it's not. Mm-hmm. So yes, the remains were unearthed from a Denisovan cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia more than a decade ago, but it was only recently that scientists were able to use the fossil piece to arrive at some answers. For more than 10 years, little research was done on the remains due to technological limitations, but that changed with the commencement of a new project called Finder. Like the Finder on my Mac here, my little folder finder, which aimed to shed light...
Find My Ancestor app.
Yeah, which aimed to shed light on the relationship between Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, and the Denisovans. The Denisovans, or Denisova homonyms, are an extinct species or subspecies of archaic humans that ranged across Asia during the lower and middle Paleolithic. They are only known from a few physical remains and DNA evidence. Fossil fingerprinting and identification of new Denisovan remains from Pleistocene Asia is what Finder stands for. The team began studying the fragments discovered in 2010 and were soon able to conclude that nearly all the bones had been chewed by animals, rendering them unidentifiable.
Oh, no.
That's not good. They were eaten by the Nephilim. Project leader Katrina Dauka of the Max Planck Institute. Got a lot of mystique. If you go into the UFO stuff and the alien abduction stuff, there's always mention of the Max Planck Institute of this nefarious organization. In Jena, along with Tom Higham, deputy director of Oxford University's Radiocarbon Accelerator Unit and an advisor to Finder, worked with a new tech called zooarchaeology by mass spectrometry, which helped them arrive at the fact. It's a fact that every human mammal group has or have had a distinct form of collagen. Okay. When the research proceeded further, the scientists came to know that one of the thousands of bones studied was from a human species. Further analysis at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig revealed the bone belonged to a person aged 13 or older at the time of death. The team from Max Planck Institute eventually found... How many times do they have to say Max Planck Institute? That must be some kind of SEO thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Eventually found that half of the sample contained Neanderthal DNA.
Oh my god.
The other half Denisovan DNA, making the individual the only known being whose parents were from two different species.
That's not true. That's a mule. A mule is part horse, part donkey. That's two different species.
Hush.
What about a zebra or whatever it's called?
A liger.
A liger, yeah.
After authentication of their groundbreaking find, the scientists came to know that the remains from Siberia were of a hybrid daughter of a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father. They nicknamed her Denny. The team's research was published in the journal Nature. It's published, so it must be true.
Yeah.
So, this is one of those things that, science and the labs and everything, they try to come up with a narrative or bolster their narratives about our ancient past. And it's fascinating to me that there is a biblical account of the B'nai Elohim, it's translated sons of God, who saw the daughters of men, the daughters of Adam, and apparently mated with them, took them as wives, and then they had children, and they were called the Nephilim, and, made God pretty angry because God said, each after their own kind during creation. It's all over the first couple chapters of Genesis. But then obviously we had the fall, but then even after that in Genesis 6, we have this account that led to the flood, some kind of abomination genetically, perhaps. So, finding this type of, artifact or whatever, it speaks to this idea that, first of all, the science, modern science, they have to categorize, they have to label things. So from the get-go, the premise could be wrong. They categorize these Denisovans, these Neanderthals, based on genetic information they find. But couldn't somebody in the same milieu, couldn't somebody, like, this is theoretical, I'm not saying this is, factual, but theoretically, 1 million years from now, somebody can take like a remains of a human from 2020 and the remains of a monkey from or an ape maybe from, 1800 or something like that, and say like, oh, their genetics are so close. They must have been, partner species or species that were close to each other, and then if you find somebody that has some genetic material or genetic code that seems to represent the ape, but it's also human. Oh, there was a ape-human hybrid. When really they maybe just shared some aspects of the same genome. So, I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to say I understand all this stuff. But from the biblical context, it's interesting to me that they're starting to talk about a hybrid, an ancient hybrid from two different species, which, again, the biblical account has, which led to the flood.
Well, I think that is an interesting part. Yeah, it's almost, it's funny because they say, oh, it's the first time we've ever seen it. We didn't think it could happen before. Yeah, I still stand by the Liger and the mule comment, but okay. But also, yeah, it's in the biblical account that there were, chimeric beings that were not approved of. And it's interesting how we see that kind of repeat itself over and over. The science sort of referring back to what may have been put in different words in the Bible, but inevitably trying to say the same thing.
The account of some kind of hybridization in our history, which is I think more fascinating. You got Greek mythology, you got all that kind of stuff. So
real biological inequality. This is something which is way beyond just another species.
Human machine hybrids. Data is the key, and they will have power over us. That freaked me out.
That freaked me out, man.
That freaked me out.